region is beautiful. I mean, it's incredible. Yep. It's really breathtaking.
Yep.
Really enjoy it. More outdoor people anyhow.
Well.
Oh dear. Expect to see a few more faces.
Can you hear me, Jim?
That's you, Scott.
I can't hear you. Let me change my audio.
Okay. I can give you some audio if you need, just so you can figure out what's going on.
Days and we're just getting high voltage testing. So
Oh, good, cool.
getting real exciting.
That's awesome.
Most of the airplanes are.
Okay, it's 2:00. I don't see any other people on. I saw Lynn flash up and Scott.
I've been here.
Who's that?
Hello, Bob.
Okay, Bob. Good, Bob. Chuck, are you there?
Screen. Should be on the screen.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. All right, I will call the meeting of the Mojave Air and Spaceport Board of Directors meeting to order. And what I want to do real quick is introduce our new CEO, General Manager, Todd Lindner. And I just have him quickly give us kind of a brief background on him. Todd?
Thank you, Jim. Todd Lindner, moved here from Jacksonville, Florida. I am extremely honored and humbled to be holding this position. I'm walking in the footsteps of a lot of the folks that I have really idolized and used as mentors over the years, and really looking forward to getting deep into this organization and continuing to develop and helping you achieve the mission and vision of this organization. Thank you again for having me. I look forward to getting to know all of you better as we go into the future, and good luck to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. All right. You just call to order. Roll call, please. Director Coleman?
Here.
Director Barney?
Here.
Director Deaver?
Here.
Director Morgan?
Here.
And Director Ballantyne here. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Motion.
Motion to approve the agenda.
All right, have a motion by Director Barney, second by Director Deaver. Any questions? All in favor? Director Coleman?
Aye.
Director Barney?
Aye.
Director Deaver?
Aye.
Director Morgan?
Aye.
And Director Ballantyne? Aye. All right, next item is community announcements. Members of the audience may make announcements regarding community events. Is there anyone out there who'd like to make a community announcement?
I don't think we approved the agenda.
I think we did. We did, because I took a roll call on it.
You got the vote?
Good.
Yeah, okay. No community announcements. Next item is the consent calendars. Item A, minutes of the regular board meeting of March 2nd this year. And checks register dated March 16th this year. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Motion by Coleman.
Thank you, Chuck.
Second, Deaver.
Second by Deaver. All right. All in favor, Director Coleman?
Aye.
Director Barney?
Aye.
Director Deaver?
Aye.
Director Morgan.
Aye.
And Director Valentine. Aye. All right, consent calendar is approved. Next item, David, are you on?
I am on. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
I can't. So for some reason, my voice over the computer's not working. So I'm watching on the computer and going over my phone for voice. But as long as you can hear me, we're good.
Yeah, it actually works well. So, okay, you want to take item A?
Yeah, item A, resolution amending board policy 100. I'm going to let Lynn and Scott, if necessary, explain to you the action item.
All right.
So,
Okay.
I'll let who?
yeah,
Go ahead, Scott.
this just reflects a change in job title for Floyd from, I believe, Director of Planning to Director of Facilities. This does not otherwise change the conflict of interest code or create any new designated positions.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve item A?
Motion to approve item A.
Okay, now you have a motion from Director Barney. Do I have a second? Come on, guys.
Beaver seconds the motion.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, do we have any discussion on it or any questions? Okay, none being, roll call, Director Coleman,
Aye.
Director Barney,
Aye.
Director Deaver,
Aye.
Director Morgan,
Aye.
and Director Valentine, aye. Item A is approved unanimously. Next item is Taxiway C rehab project presentation, and I believe Bob, you're gonna handle this.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you bring up the slides?
I don't have any slides, Jason.
Hi, you.
Hi, Bruce.
Jason?
Welcome to the board meeting.
How's it going?
Jason, are you listening? Okay, there we go.
Here we are.
Okay.
No pressure.
All right. Thank you. So the issue is the top row of hangars here, adjacent to Taxiway Charlie at the west end. They're labeled 915 Alpha through 927. They are 75 feet from the center line of Taxiway Charlie. There's an assumption or analysis that was done that required greater clearance, and to comply with the grant qualification for the rework on the taxiway, it was determined that these had to be removed by the previous manager. There's currently no plans to replace these 12 hangars, and the replacement cost is considerable if you make some assumption like 50 to 100,000 per hangar. It could be as much as $1 million or more if you include concrete work and a new taxiway. It's my contention, I don't think these buildings violate the airport design requirements standard and AC 150 when applied correctly. If you can bring up the next slide, please. Is there a way to maximize these slides? Hit the play button or whatever in PowerPoint or whatever, that'll work. So the question is, what aircraft can taxi on Charlie and could possibly strike the hangars? Basically a wingtip to building collision. And the chart, so I took, FAA has a database of 2,765 aircraft, and it's used for airport design. And there's a sample of it here in the table on the left. On the right is a plot of all those aircraft, not just the ones in the table, but all 2,765. The ones that, so basically anything, if you're on the center line with 150 foot or more wingspan, you would definitely hit the buildings, right? So everything on the right is a potential conflict. Everything on the left is smaller. This simplification doesn't account for the FAA standards of, if you're not on the center line on object clearance, but I get to that later. But you get an idea of what we're dealing with. Okay, next slide, please. So then the question is, the west end of Taxiway Charlie accesses 2 runways, 8 and 4, and nothing else. Pardon me? Now, the shown below is the airport facility directory for Mojave with the weight limits on those 2 runways. And they're 88,000 and 60,000 respectively for aircraft specifically with like dual axle, dual tire. There's only certain aircraft that can even go to that limit. So for instance, a single axle main, they're limited to only 40,000 pound airplanes. Dual axle, 60,000. And then if there's like multiple tire bogies per axle, you can get all the way up to the 88,000. Next slide, please. So realistically, what aircraft can use runways 8 and 4? The weight limits in both runways limit them to aircraft in the aircraft design group classifications 1 and 2 only. In the lower right, it shows the various classifications of aircraft the FAA uses for determining taxiway design and runway design. And what you can see is I've put a red box for categories 3 through 6. So those airplanes would not be using the taxiway because they exceed the weight limits of the runways that taxiway feeds. And then if you look at the upper plot, it's the same data of all airplanes in the FAA database. And the 2 red boxes represent airplanes that exceed the weight limits of the runways. So the only ones that could taxi there are the sliver at the very bottom of the graph on that top plot. And if you go to the next slide, I've zoomed in on that region. Okay, so what you're looking at in this plot is everything above 88,000, which is the red box at the top, is too heavy. So the only aircraft remaining, and this is a plot of gross weight versus wingspan like the previous one, same data, but just zoomed in to the portion of aircraft that actually can take off, land, or operate on those runways. So what you can see is the airplanes that would hit the buildings are in the pink zone on the right, which is 0. There are no airplanes in the database that are light enough to use those runways for takeoff and also collide with the buildings. So if you apply the design process that the FAA uses for taxiways for an object-free area, OFA, it's similar situation. So, for example, you can see the few airplanes that have a low enough wing loading, that have a long enough wingspan and a high enough weight to even come close is, for instance, like a DC-4 is the only airplane in the green zone. That's an airplane that has 20 feet of wingtip clearance. And there's only like a half dozen DC-4s in operation in the world, virtually none in the U.S. And there's only 2 that operate internationally. So even that airplane has 20 feet of clearance. Next slide, please. So this is the way the FAA designs taxiway requirements, and I believe is what I haven't seen how the analysis was done previously, but what you can see is the green box is for categories 1 and 2. And a category 2 airplane, which would be the limiting case, needs an OFA, which is an object-free area of 131 feet. That's the total call it a span, if you will. There's a green arrow in the lower right image that shows you what that is. So that's the semi-span of 131, which would be 65 and a half. So we, as you recall, we have 75 feet clearance. The requirement is 65 and a half. So for category 1 and 2 airplanes, the west end of Taxiway Charlie is more than adequate. It has a 19-foot margin for any airplane that could actually operate off those runways. Next slide, please. So what could we do? Well, the buildings don't violate the design requirements for AC 150. We could contact the airport district office of the FAA and discuss this to correct the OFA calculation that apparently we applied, possibly erroneous to ourselves. We could change the airport facility directory to limit the taxiway to category 2 aircraft, essentially 79 feet or less. The justification is there's no aircraft that are both within the load ratings of the adjacent runways and have a wingspan that would strike the hangars. An alternative, rather than redoing the OFA calculation, is apply a restriction in our airport facility directory similar to what Monterey has that I've highlighted in green here. So their example is, you can see, if you could zoom in on that so everyone can read it. And I spoke to the airport manager at Monterey. He explained that they applied for a temporary, basically, it's not called a waiver, but temporary design requirement change. But can you zoom in? Jason or someone, can you zoom in on that paragraph on the right that's in green so people can see what that says? Thank you. Down a little bit, please. So, for instance, this is what Monterey has. They have 2 different instances where wingspans could cause a collision. They have, first one, aircraft with wingspan greater than 95 feet may not taxi past the terminal on Taxiway Alpha when an MD-80 or 757 is parked at the terminal. And then they have another pinch point, if you will, aircraft with wingspan greater than 65 feet prohibited on Taxiway Bravo between Echo and Delta. So I looked at their report. They, in fact, have a hangar that's within 50 feet of the center line of one of their taxiways that feeds their T hangars and other small hangars. That's all I've got to present. I think we should open it up for discussion.
Right, is there anyone out there that would like to comment on Bob's presentation?
That's very intriguing data, and I'm really curious as to what analysis was done that led us to believe that those hangars are in violation, that there might be some collision hazard with the aircraft. I'm wondering if there's just something that isn't crossing our minds, but no, I think that's a very compelling presentation. Thank you, Bob, for digging all that data up and consolidating it. Can anybody speak to whether or not we can see the previous analysis?
Yes, I'm sorry, I don't know if can you hear me? This is Floyd.
Yes, hello.
Hi, Floyd.
Afternoon. So, I mean, most of what Director Morgan said is accurate as far as the information cited. One thing I would like to point out and consider heavily is the fact that the current taxiway, or the taxiway in its current construction, which is underway now, was not a category or a Charlie 2 design group. It was designed under Charlie 3. And that dates back to the 2010, essentially the 2010 ALP, when the ALP and the Airport Capital Improvement Program listed runway 1230. When we extend and widen runway 826, that's done to a Charlie 3 so that we can service the largest aircraft that the runway will be able to accommodate. And one of those reasons is, again, back to the 2010 ALP, but it was a consideration of the FAA and The airport at that time, that because of the low percentage of crosswind coverage on 1230, that it was in the best interest to improve the infrastructure and increase the capacity of runway 0826. So I would point out that if using a Charlie 3 aircraft design group, the clearance is not 75 foot, it would be 93 foot from center line, which is in conflict with the hangars.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So the question is, the runway isn't presently designed to that. If we plan to expand it, I suppose we could readdress that as one option, and then readdress removing those hangars. Or we could further discuss, what's our long-term goals for that runway as well. Like, is that still something we're all in agreement as should be in our plan?
Yeah, so it sounds like, calling Taxiway Charlie a Category 3, and Floyd, please correct me if I misrepresent what you said, but so it sounds like if we consider Taxiway Charlie to be a Category 3 taxiway, then we need the 93-foot clearance as opposed to the 65 that we have, or 75 that's required for a Category 2. But as long as 826 is currently limited to the weights that we're limiting it to, it doesn't really matter if Category 3 aircraft can use Taxiway Charlie anyway. So the debate is, I guess, Bob, I'm just making sure I understand what you said, is 826, are we going to plan on upping the weight limit or doing something to accommodate Category 3 aircraft?
No, what was designed and approved by the FAA, so what the taxiway is currently being built to is a Charlie 3. So it will be, upon completion, based on what the FAA approved and what our plans are, what our design is, it will be Category 3 or Charlie 3.
Okay, so that will be Taxiway Charlie, but does having a Category 3 a functionality design requirement for Taxiway Charlie do us any good if 826 can't accommodate that category of aircraft anyway?
Well, that is the long-term plan, is that the runway 826, as part of our approved airport capital improvement plan, is to increase not only the length and width and structural ability of that runway.
Excuse me, Floyd. Can you hear me okay, Jim?
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead.
If I might interrupt here. So, thank you, Floyd. I just want to make a couple comments to Bob's presentation. The first is that nobody disputes his information. He's pretty much accurate. We stipulate to that. And I don't think the question of this is whether it is appropriate in the present. That's a rather myopic view. When we plan with the FAA and when we plan for the airport, we plan decades out. We don't plan for tomorrow. We don't plan for the week after next. We literally plan out 10, 20 years. When we do that in past budget processes that we've gone through and working with the CEO, both the past CEO and Stu Witt, we chart out what are the potential opportunities that exist for the airport. And based on those opportunities, we work with staff and the FAA to make a determination on what we can do now to make those happen in the future. And that really is the issue here. But once again, we're not disputing what Mr. Morgan has to say. It's very valid. The dispute is whether do you want to plan for the future where there may be other opportunities outside of space, aerospace, outside of general aviation that will bring revenues to the airport and sustain it in the long term. I mean, out 100 years. So these are the principles that these budgets have. These are the principles that are behind long-term planning and working with the FAA. If you want 826 to be a 6,000-foot runway and 100 feet wide, whatever it is, if you want it to be that way forever, then that's one thing. If you want it to be a potential opportunity for possibly logistics and some other things down the road and bring millions and millions of dollars to the airport, that's another. It's up to the board Mr. Chairman, I would request, I'm going to ask my staff, or the staff at this point, to kind of lay back here and let you guys decide which direction that you want to go. I think I've laid it out for the board. I think I've laid it out for those that are listening in. And now it's up to the board to decide how prescient they want to be, how forward-looking they want to be, and what they want the future of the airport to be. And that's your call, and we're standing by to do whatever you would like.
And thank you so much, Floyd, for presenting the information and correcting my terminology and my understanding. But I would like to add to the discussion in that the idea of growing 826 to open up for opportunity, yes, that is one potential future. But I don't believe it is myopic to consider alternatives. We will have lost opportunities as well by diminishing our capacity for general aviation hangars. And so that's the other side of it. This isn't a clear direction of definitively making one decision is future looking while the other is only looking towards the present.
I have a question, Jim. I understand what Bob made, and I agree with what people are saying, and I agree with the long-term view. The long-term is a ways out. Is there a way that the FAA would let us find a location for relocated T hangars, not this week or next week or in the next? In other words, give us a little respite both ways until we start getting closer. We stipulate that we want to bid, and but in the meantime, we want to ask them to get put together so we can keep these T hangars. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit.
Or something like that.
You're breaking up a little bit, but I think people are understanding what you're asking. Somebody's coming.
Okay.
Well, this is Floyd again. I would just like to mention or throw out that, unfortunately, the time to debate a alternative design has somewhat eclipsed. Well, it's really eclipsed. I mean, some of those things we could have asked for modification of standards potentially if there was a viable modification that we proposed, but the time to do that and to alter the plan was in the design phase, which was approved year before last. So it becomes extremely detrimental to us.
When is an appropriate time for the constituency to chime in? Is this an inappropriate time, or I'm sorry, I've never done one of these meetings via Zoom.
Who's speaking?
This is Scott Glazer from Flight Research. I just had a couple comments. I don't know if this is the right time. I might be speaking out of turn. Please let me know. I can shut up if.
Mr. Coleman.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, I'm Senior VP of Ops at Flight Research, and I'm hearing a couple of conflicting things. You know, I think there's benefit to both. The general aviation community at Mojave is what built Mojave, and it needs to be supported. And we feel that way at our company. It's vital to the future. So these two things aren't mutually exclusive; they're supportive. So if you don't support general aviation in the short term, there won't be a long term. So you need both. I don't see a reason other than what Floyd was bringing up that the current plan is to tear down those hangars. It seems reasonable to me, again, brand new to this, and I was brought in because people brought up the topic of this meeting, why the airport can't continue building the taxiways the way they are. Leave the hangars there, put the exception in the AFM, and then if and when we build a bigger runway, if it's required to tear down the hangars at that point, there will be grant money to do other things, including supporting the general aviation infrastructure. But I don't think you can solely look at general aviation without looking at the future, but you can't look at the future of this airport without general aviation. That would be extremely short-sighted.
Well said, Scott.
Mr. Coleman has a comment too then.
Go ahead, Chuck.
I was about to say similar to what Scott just mentioned, that I don't see that you leave the hangars in place and then when a plan, how many years is this plan away till they widen or strengthen runway 826? And if it's 5 years away, why would we not leave the hangars in place until that becomes us? You've got the two lanes that the cars drive on and everything, so there seems to be plenty of room for the resurfacing the taxiway at this point while the building's remaining up and producing revenue for the airport.
Okay, well, it seems like there's kind of a unasked question, and I'll ask it to Floyd, Dave, maybe even Todd. If we were to pursue this with the FAA, it's going to change the contract with Granite, I know, all this. What is worst case impact and what is best case impact?
I'm going to let Floyd answer it in detail. First off, we're trying to undo something that's done. If we go down this route, it's been approved. Grant money has been given. It's $8 million. Where are you going to get $8 million from anywhere to do things like this? So that was one of the reasons that this was all charted out. Obviously there would be charges because of a contract change. There would be charges because of the recycling of the metal. We'd have to go back and get FAA approval if they'd signed it on. The FAA goes to great lengths to accommodate us, and we have future things in the pipeline with them that we certainly don't want to disturb. I will just say, I think at this point, I appreciate the comment about general aviation. They all go hand in hand. I don't know that this is a general aviation versus, flight test and aerospace decision, and I don't think it's conflicting with it. They both build one another, but it's going to be very detrimental if we back out of this and change it. But I'll let Floyd answer any questions. Go ahead, Floyd.
And the risk we run really is for the FAA to rescind the grant, which means that if we change the plan now that it's underway and it's been approved, the FAA rescinds the grant. We have to pay back all of the grant money essentially that we've already received. Plus, we would be under the hook to finish out the contract with the work that's been done, and essentially float the rest of the contract ourselves potentially. And we would I will defer to legal counsel, but there could be considerations from litigation from the contractors for in the event that the grant is rescinded by the FAA.
Yeah, so I'd like to comment on that. I don't see any conflict with the current grant. The way I see it is we're putting in a notation in the airport facility directory, which presently we really don't even need that because the airport has been operating with 826 with its current limits for decades and decades without any restriction on the wingspan there, and the appropriate airplanes have used the appropriate taxiways and runways. So, but as a precaution, we would contact the FAA and say, hey, we're going to retain these hangars until we collectively, the FAA and the airport, decides to upgrade the runway. And until then, the taxiway has got the appropriate path for an upgrade for Class 3 aircraft. But we don't need to move the buildings for the free object area clearance until we actually complete the runway project. And therefore, we can keep those hangars and maintain the revenue. And the FAA would probably be supportive of that because that's their intent, is to support the health and the growth of the airport. Taking those hangars out is detrimental to the current airport's health. It's taking away revenue of a potential growth that's in a plan that may or may not happen anytime soon. It could be many years. So I don't see it as a conflict or it doesn't appear to be contradictory to what we said is the long-term plan. It's just a phasing in, unless we also decide not to phase in that other option. Then that might be a conflict with what we agreed with the FAA. But At present, just putting in a taxiway that has Class 3 design requirements doesn't mean that Class 3 aircraft can use that part of the taxiway to get anywhere other than 2 runways that they can't take off from. So there's no incentive to tear those buildings down from a compliance standpoint immediatly.
Maybe.
And I'd like to know what the contract, if there's a cancellation, I don't think we're not talking about canceling the taxiway contract. We're talking about a contract to remove the building. So we should have a discussion what the terms and conditions were on that.
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is to sit down with the FAA and find out how they feel about this. Because they're the people that got the money, and if we lose that money, it's going to be a long time before we ever see it again. Yeah. That's just the reality, unfortunately.
Well, again, I don't think we're moving in a direction that's in conflict with the intent of the grant. We're providing the upgrade, and it's part of our long-term plan. But the near term, there's no requirement to allow an airplane to taxi down to the end there. They would just get stuck. They can't even make a U-turn and come back. There's nowhere to go.
I understand that.
The runway. Okay.
I'm somebody who worked in the Department of Transportation in Washington, D.C. back in the early 80s. And you don't just go in and say, okay, this is what we want to do. And
I understand.
Say, okay, that's what I'm concerned about. Maybe it might be. I don't think it would hurt anything to sit down and talk to these people.
No, of course not.
Rather than just arbitrarily saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. How's that?
This is John Himes. May I chime in?
Go ahead, John.
So since we're talking about numbers and we're talking about figures, and Director Deaver, you know this as somebody who's worked in the government system. The FAA predicated our grant on the removal of the hangars. The grant is $9 million. The annual income from that particular T hangar row is $68,438 annually. So if you divide $9 million by 68,000, it'll take us 130, worst case scenario, 131 years to pay that back. When you return money or you alter a grant with the FAA has the option to pull that grant. If they pull that grant, they will also pull the grant to runway 1230 because no government agency likes to take money back at the end of the year and then be forced to find a way to spend it. Now, if they take back the grant I'm not going to say we're a promise, but it looks very compelling that we're going to receive for runway 1230. That's a $34 million grant.
24, John.
Say that again.
24. FAA's approved plan. I'd point out that the FAA, through the grant monies, is participating in the removal of the hangars, which is something that they typically wouldn't do. So if we do a change to the contract that jeopardizes that, we jeopardize the fact simply that the FAA would not help us to remove the hangars later if we were required to do so. But I would point out that any change to the approved plan jeopardizes the overall grant.
Right. So,
and I would like to ask also, if I may, if Mead and Hunt, the project engineers, if they're on the line, if there are any comments that or thoughts that they had regarding the execution of the grant and a change to the plan at this point, if they had any thoughts or comments regarding such.
Who is it?
Yeah, Floyd, thank you. This is Chuck McCormick from Mead and Hunt. I can offer a few items if you'd like.
Please, go ahead.
I concur in Floyd's statement is the plans and specs were approved. The project was designed to ADG Airport Design Group 3 standards, which is based on tail height and wingspan, not aircraft weight. But that's based on what's on the approved ALP from the FAA. That was done, I think, back, like Floyd said, back in 2010 or 2012, that time frame. So that is the latest approved document. So that's how we approved it. Actually, I used to work at the FAA. I worked at the ADO, so I know their process well. Spent 20 years of my career there. The risk is yes, the project has been approved through all the reviews with the FAA. They reviewed the plans. We have monthly meetings with them on the project and projects. And so there is a risk of change now to it. The airport would be required to go back to the FAA, request the plans be changed to keep the hangars in place. Again, it's two ADG 3 standards, and that's what the design was based on what the ALP was showing.
Okay, thanks.
This is Bill Deaver. I have another
question. Bill, hang on. Director Barney had a comment.
Yes. So, just based on some of the rhetoric I'm hearing, it sounds like there may be some assumptions out there that the airport would go to the FAA and say, "Hey, FAA, we changed our minds. We're not tearing down the hangars. Are you going to take our grant money?" And I would be really surprised if that was anybody's intent. I think the discussion is approaching the FAA, finding out the right way to request, "Hey, can we make this change and proceed with the grant money and otherwise as planned?" I think we're requesting to make a change, not taking a stand and then moving. These are two separate things.
Right.
Mr. Coleman has a comment.
Hang on. Bill, you're next.
Yeah, I was just wondering, probably eventually someday those T hangars, regardless of what happens, are going to have to be removed. Is there a way that we could start the process right now to putting together the money? I know we've got land around there to move those T hangars or build new T hangars on a new location. I mean, we're talking about removing the T hangars. There's been no talk about replacing them. What are we going to do to replace them, and can we expedite that process?
I agree with you, Bill. And we should have that discussion. I think more immediate is, can we leave those there near term? Because I don't know how long this will be before the runways get upgraded. Just to put another thing in perspective, using the numbers that John Himes used for the rent taken in, if you assume a normal cost of living increase, over the next 10 years, that's $1 million in hangar revenue in their present location. So there's a near term, not a theoretical loss in revenue, taking those out. The cost to replace them will be on the order of $1 million. I don't disagree with Bill. We should be having the discussion to have plans to put more general aviation hangars or medium-sized hangars in at the West End or elsewhere on the airport. So I'd like to so I think that's great because we don't have anything in our plan for the expansion of that. But the near-term concern is, do these hangars need to be removed immediately per the present plan and per the grant agreement? Or could we defer that with a discussion with the FAA and continue renting them near term and come up with a strategy towards our long-term goals?
That's exactly the same thing I was saying, John. I agree with her, Bob. I agree with you.
Okay.
You want to comment?
This is Todd. I have a question. On the current ALP, on the current approved ALP, does it say that the current reference code for that taxiway is Group 3 or Group 2? And if it says Group 3, then yes, I understand we need to move forward with doing this project to Group 3 standards. If it's Group 2 and the future Group 3, that's something a little bit different, and not that we should consider doing something different, but that does provide an area for additional questions. Also, I would definitely move forward with determining the location and the infrastructure necessary to accommodate new T hangars to replace the ones that are going to be demoed. It's just a matter of time, and that would be a question I would have. Is that I would think that would have been something that should have been addressed before we got to this point in this project. Also, as it relates to the runway and use of the runway for Group 3 aircraft and the taxiway, you can operate a Group 3 aircraft on a Group 2 runway. It happens all the time. The problem is you don't want it happening more than 500 times a year, because if it does, that means that is a Group 3 runway and taxiway. So to think that Group 3 aircraft will not use that's not necessarily true. But to your point, I do believe that we need to escalate or accelerate the development of the new T hangars, and that needs to be added to the airport layout plan and move forward with that.
Amen.
Okay, does anyone else have any comments?
Mr. Coleman, if I could add in that there seems to be a lot of speculation about losing all the FAA money and things like that. And I don't think until we go to the FAA and ask those things that they would say no way or something. But the speculation's pretty rampant that I've heard from previous people. And I don't know that there was indeed a future plan for building new hangars to replace the 12 that were taken down. You would think, we got to take 12 hangars down. Where are we going to replace those? What's the future for that? I mean, this new, Group 3 runway might be 10 years from now. And did they have a plan at all to build new hangars in addition?
This is Todd again, if I may jump back in there. I agree with what Mr. Coleman just said. And I think this would be a good time for me, as part of my indoctrination. I think it'd be a good opportunity to do two things. Number one, to allow me to get to know the FAA, and at the same time, I could ask these less than delicate questions, and I could be the sacrificial lamb, and let them tell me one way or other, what we can or cannot do, or what we have to do. If everybody's on board with that, I'll be glad to take that on in the next few days.
I was hoping
you said that, Todd. It's not a sacrificial lamb scenario.
Well,
but
they can slap me around.
Yes. You sure picked a great time to take this job.
Well, I think Todd's exactly right. The question needs to be asked, and it needs to be asked in a manner that's workable for both parties. I'm glad Todd stepped up to the task. Anyway, I think that's what we're really looking for. Is there an option? And somebody needs to step in and work with the parties involved to see if there's an option, and then we can move forward from there.
I think that's a good idea, and I think we ought to move on to the next. Do we need a motion to direct?
I would like to ask one question on the current topic. First is there an impending schedule with somebody to demolish and remove those buildings? Is that something Todd needs to look?
The timing of that is scheduled for the beginning of June. So what I would add at this point is we do have a monthly call with FAA. The next opportunity to talk to the ADO will be on the 21st, and that will certainly be well before June.
Yeah. Okay. And this is the contract to remove those buildings is separate from the pavers, right?
No, it is not. That is what the problem with changing the project at this point is it's all, you change one element, we jeopardize changing the entire thing. And
I don't know we jeopardize it, but I'm sure we could negotiate it. Okay, thank you.
We can ask the question on the 21st.
Yeah, great.
To answer Director Deaver's question, you do not have to take action on this. You can direct staff to discuss these issues further with the FAA without having a vote on it.
All right, and
let's do that.
Todd's shaking his head yes. All right.
Welcome to Mojave,
Is
Todd.
there?
Thank you, Mr. Deaver.
It's downhill from here. Is there
That's
any
the
more
way you get
discussion
things
on?
done.
Hey, don't interrupt me, Bill. Is there any more discussion on item B? All right. Next we have reports, financial report. Carrie, I believe you're going to take that.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. These are the financial reports for month ending February 28th. You'll see the bank balance go down by 48,000. Our fuel sales, we have a year to date of 936 gallons sold. So typically our goal is 1 million gallons. So we're almost already there with a few months left in the year. AR aging, Dragon Aviation continues to make their current payment. And they just made one that's not reflected on the report because we received the payment this week, about $1,700. The forestry, we are currently working with them. They have left the area, but just due to their processes, it takes a little while to receive the payment. Fitness center is back open. Space is limited, so if you guys decide to go to the gym, be sure to make reservations. Once they move into the next tier, then they'll have more slots available, but they have asked for everyone to make reservations. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Carrie. Next item is CEO, General Manager's report. David?
Just one or two items. We did get a full-time replacement in the control tower for a party that left, so we hope to be getting him up to speed. If there's any questions on that from anybody, feel free to ask John Himes. We signed a couple of significant leases. One with Newport Development was an option to lease 5 acres and to have potential items constructed there. And we just inked a deal with Maston on 2.9 acres, 20-year lease, 2 5-year options that we had previously discussed with the board, and that was approved. Other than that, that concludes my report.
Thank you, David, and thank you for your service in filling in interim during this process of hiring our new CEO.
My pleasure. You know, I probably should make a couple other comments, Jim. I just want the board to know that I spent time with the staff and Mr. Lindner yesterday. We had a staff meeting. We went over all the outstanding items. There's been an appropriate handoff to Mr. Lindner, and I look forward to him doing great things, and both he and the board have all my support, as well as the staff. And I want everybody to know that he's in charge. There seems to be a little bit of misrepresentation in the press that he had to work with me for a month or two before he got the reins. No, he had the reins the day he showed up. So I just want that to be out there and known.
Thank you, Dave.
You bet.
Thank you, Dave. We have no board committees. Do the board of directors have any comments on items not on the agenda? All right, I believe that is none. Public comment for items not on the agenda. Members of the public may make comments to the board on items not on the agenda. Is there anyone out there? Okay, I assume there is not. We will go into closed session at this time. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I believe those who want to remain to have a report out of the closed session, Jason will put you in the waiting room, and then he notifies you, I believe, somehow, when we're out and back into open session again. Thank you very much, everyone.
Hey, Director Ballantyne, if we could ask Doug Gosling to just hang on for the first closed session item, if he has a minute.
Okay, sure, Doug, you can do that?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we're now into closed session. I'm going to go lock the doors.
I still have some people on that shouldn't be on. I guess we're okay.
Yeah, we'll get everyone off before we start.
All right.
letting people in right now because he just let me back in.
Got it. Thank you.
Doors are open in the boardroom.
Scott, this is Todd. If I may ask, when will you be back in Florida? I mean, when will you be back in California?
I fly home Friday.
Okay.
In closed session, the board discussed one case of potential litigation involving scaled composites, and David Evans did his final CEO evaluation. No action was taken, and no other items were discussed in closed session.
Thank you, Scott. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you all. Take care.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.